V-aș invita să... Ok, ne-am reîntors. Bun. Ok. Aș vrea să verific. Iftak, are you there with us? If you could open your mic, please.
Yes, I'm here.
Ok. Pentru cea de-a doua sesiune am pregătit o discuție de tip panel, preponderent cu invitați de la nivelul societății civile, atât naționale cât și internaționale, cu reprezentanți care au lucrat îndeaproape cu refugiații LGBTQI+, în România, dar și în străinătate. Scopul acestei sesiuni este de a elabora puțin pe baza raportului pe care l-am văzut mai devreme, de a discuta mai mult despre riscuri, bune practici și reflecții. Și desigur, după încheierea întrebărilor și răspunsurilor din partea paneliștilor, va exista o sesiune de întrebări și răspunsuri pentru dumneavoastră. Aș vrea să introduc foarte pe scurt paneliștii și o să le dau fiecăruia dintre ei ocazia de a se prezenta. Cred că voi spune doar numele și organizația la urma urmei. Cred că e cel mai simplu. Ok, o avem alături de noi pe Ruth Borgfjord. Bun. Ea reprezintă ONG-ul Hilltop din Queer Sisterhood din Cluj. De asemenea pe Iftak Milo, care din păcate nu a putut să fie astăzi prezent cu noi, dar s-a conectat online. El este directorul de țară pentru organizația HIAS. Și nu în ultimul rând pe Konstantina Loupeidou, am cunoscut-o, s-a introdus deja coordonatorul PSEA în România din partea UNHCR-ului, dar aș vrea să le dau oricum ocazia fiecăruia să se prezinte.
Bună, numele meu este Ruth. Am început Queer Sisterhood, prima organizație de femei LGBT din România, în 2015. Cel mai recent am organizat marșul pentru siguranța femeilor la Cluj și am făcut acest document despre siguranța femeilor LGBT în relații. Suntem o organizație de femei pentru femei LGBT. Acționăm nu doar în Cluj, acționăm și în toată țara și de când a început invazia Ucrainei anul trecut în februarie, am avut și călătorii în Ucraina la adăposturile LGBT de acolo, unde am dus ajutoare umanitare și am oferit sprijin de sănătate mentală, unde am făcut terapie cu locuitorii acelor adăposturi. Asta e puțin despre ce facem.
And I remain the same person, but double hatting as usual. I wanted to say that UNHCR in this response has a double role, coordinating at the interagency level, but also as a direct service provider, both as an organization and through partnerships with NGOs in Romania. So in this part, I will be contributing to the best I can on this note. Thank you.
Iftak?
Bună ziua tuturor. My name is Iftak Milo and I'm the director of HIAS Romania. Also was the director of HIAS Moldova until a week ago. HIAS is a Jewish international organization based in the US. We worked with refugees and migrants in 23 countries. And I was quite involved in a few research projects that then also became programs for HIAS around LGBTQ plus refugee protection and around response to LGBTQ refugees, survivors of GBV. These researches and programs were conducted in Ecuador, Ghana, Kenya, Uganda, Chad, South Africa, and Israel. So there's quite a lot of expertise from these regions, and now unfortunately we are also exposed to the issues of LGBTQ protection and displacement here in Europe. Thank you for the invitation.
Mulțumim, Iftac. Bun, atunci o să încep cu prima întrebare referitoare la riscuri, la riscurile de safeguarding și de SEA. Știm că refugiații LGBTQI+ reprezintă un grup divers și știm că diferitele identități și circumstanțe ale acestora le determină riscul de a fi ținta unor prejudicii și abuzuri. În contextul dumneavoastră, atât în România, cât și la nivel regional sau chiar și internațional, cum ați observat că se manifestă aceste riscuri? Aceasta este o primă întrebare. Și cea de-a doua, există grupuri de refugiați LGBTQI+ care se confruntă cu riscuri sporite de safeguarding sau cu riscuri specifice de safeguarding? Cine dorește să înceapă? Sigur, da.
Nu știu de ce m-am pregătit pentru asta în engleză, pentru că avem, cred că, conversațiile în engleză și acum încerc să le traduc în mintea mea. Okay. So some of the things that I've seen personally, I was actually part of doing the research for Romania, the study on LGBT Ukrainian refugees in Romania. And in talking to the Romanian organizations, one of us, one being Queer Sisterhood, and the others, some from Bucharest and some from Iași, Brașov. The ones from Timișoara were not specifically involved, as we've noticed nationally that a lot of LGBT Ukrainian refugees do not necessarily choose Romania as a host country because we do not have a lot of protection for LGBT people. And just to clarify, and I'm sure everyone here is familiar with the term, I use LGBT to mean lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, intersex, queer, and asexual people. I am a lesbian woman. In my experience, when we try to seek help, or as a Romanian national, it is very difficult to think of as Romania as a safe haven. Although I choose to live here and I choose to work here, I believe there's purpose in that. But I can see why LGBT people who come through Romania may not decide to make this their final destination. So in my experience, either with helping refugees on the ground in Cluj or helping them transition Romania by offering transportations or connecting them to other networks, some of the stories that we've heard were around, first of all, we knew that men could not cross the border at a certain point after the invasion started. And then we have the issue of trans men, and people are familiar with this. In many of their IDs, in their documents, they are recognized as female, or as male, that not allowing them to cross the borders. So one of the risks that we've noticed was this illegal crossing happening, and some of this illegal crossing was with the support of LGBT organizations, and it was good, it was helpful, but it did involve, it had risks of drowning, they had to cross rivers and such. And there was another risk of actually people connecting with, I don't know what the term is, groups of people who offer illegal crossing, but who may end up actually using people in human trafficking, smugglers, for human trafficking and other things or to take their money and possessions. So that was one of the things that we've heard about, and then we saw other issues that have come up to, or that we were asked to provide help with, was around women, because that was the general population that was able to cross, women to receive LGBT support, or from organizations that were sort of vetted in a way, rather than just going with people who they met at the borders, even if they were from official organization. There was a reticence there, a fear that I think exactly what was being presented in the report. If I do use state support, I may not be able to share my sexual orientation or my gender identity for fear of encountering discrimination. So those are some of the things that we've heard about. We've seen this in the news. I'm sure all of you know the intersection between LGBT and race or ethnicity, when people were separated because they were Roma or black or people of color. So we've seen people who have these intersections being more maybe at a risk than white, middle class, job holding LGBT women, who we have some from this particular group who live in Cluj, and when you look at them, you think there's not much risk there in terms of what they may experience. But as time passes, one of the things that I noticed was the mental health actually risk and the harm that was done is there, even if the people have the finances or the stability of a work that they were able to keep even after leaving Ukraine. So we see the physical harm that they can encounter, and we also see the long-term effects of the mental and psychological harm that can take place.
Thank you, Ruth. Would anyone in the panel like to take this question? Iftak?
I think Ruth covered much of this. I just want to maybe strengthen some of the point. It is true that the main sort of strategy of coping is passing, and passing meaning trying to look and mitigate some of the differences, and this has a very strong impact on mental well-being. But this is a strategy that is being adapted by many LGBTQ refugees, and of course those that are more visible or more different or look different may experience higher risk, and this is especially for the trans community. As Ruth was saying, we see sort of also a group that is at very high risk is women of color that are also refugees and LGBTQ. This is, they're basically experiencing triple jeopardy, being women, being refugees, being of color, and LGBTQ. We see sort of an increasing amount of LGBTQ people self-identifying and coming out from countries that are not particularly Ukraine, but from Africa and from Asia. And they are at a very high risk due to their isolation. They try or attempt to stay away from the community of origin in Romania, and therefore find themselves extremely alone and vulnerable, at times leading to situation of dependency on care provider, on a partner that sometimes is involving sexual exploitations in exchange for shelter, accommodation, security, and sometimes also issues of extortion. So in a sense, to identify these issues, and because of passing being a mitigating coping mechanism, we need to be really proactive in order to identify those that are at risk and build this trust to facilitate their ability to come forward and report their risk, abuse, etc.
Thank you, Iftak. Konstantina, do you want to take? Yeah.
Thank you so much. Noting the risk of duplicating, we're talking indeed about the risk of sexual misconduct of humanitarians being increased by concurring vulnerabilities. So this is why we take into consideration any protection risk, any difficulty that each person, each refugee faces, and indeed we have noted that in every situation, in addition to the protection risks that every refugee is facing, LGBTIQ+ refugees are facing additional vulnerabilities. Already the legal issues, the issues about crossing the border have been mentioned, challenges for mixed families where one is a Ukrainian national and the other person is not, have been mentioned. I would like to add difficulty in accessing sexual and reproductive health rights and medical facilities and medical services in general. This is something that has been highlighted in our discussions with members of the community. And well, while we have these challenges in crossing the border, the risk of abuse, the risk of exploitation by members either of the mainstream humanitarian response, the organizations themselves, our staff themselves, or people pretending to be members of the response, such as volunteers, is very high, and the risk, linked risk with human trafficking there. So this is very increased for members of the community, especially when they have difficulty accessing, mainstream support by the authorities. What we notice also is that there is hesitations by members of the community to reach out both to the authorities and to the mainstream service providers such as UN agencies. The elephant in the room is that we have not enough, collaboration and interaction with the communities. And this can put people in even more in danger. Because if I'm, hesitating to reach out to the authorities when I have a challenge, when I'm hesitating to reach out to the UN and NGOs supporting refugees because I fear that I will not be included or I will not be safe accessing those services, this is putting each member of the community in an additional position of added vulnerability. Thank you.
I think it was mentioned, but the biggest thing that we noticed, it was not that people were Ukrainian refugees, it was LGBT refugees, or that there was something about the way they were presenting that made this distinction that caused, that was the reason for discrimination or assault on the streets. Or in services provided by state or big organizations. People not knowing how to talk to LGBT people or outing them unconsciously. All these fears make LGBT refugees cautious of the big names.
Thank you to all of you. I think before I move on to the next question, I want to emphasize a bit what was discussed here, and I would really like to make it like one of the takeaways from this roundtable, which is to always try to have this intersectional approach when thinking about the vulnerabilities of a refugee and, becoming a victim of SEA, of sexual exploitation and abuse. because it's not only, you know, its condition as a refugee, but it can be an LGBT person. It can be, you know, belonging to a certain ethnicity or having a certain color that increases the chances of that person to become a victim of SEA. Okay, so I'm going to move ahead to the next question. Okay, I have it in Romanian and English. I will read it in English this time. The report identified a range of good practices that LGBTQI+ organizations have employed to respond to mitigate safeguarding risks. Can you share with us some of the good practices that you have observed and perhaps that your very own organization is implementing? Thank you. Is there someone who would like to start first? Iftak?
Sure. Well, I think foremost, you know, in importance is really creation of a strong referral system to the LGBTQ+ organizations in Romania. At the end of the day, they have the expertise, they can provide the trustworthy environment, and I think this is extremely important. The fact that they are not, some of them are not here, means that we do have an issue or some kind of an elephant here in the room, and maybe this is an opportunity to try to resolve that in order to create this trust and collaboration between all that is involved. Apart from that, I think it's really important for the mainstream organizations to really show, first of all, visibility that, you know, the organization is LGBTQ friendly. So, you know, if you have any, you know, flags or stickers, or once there is a referral system, also phone numbers that you can put on the wall, on the office, I think this is extremely, or brochures that from the LGBTQ organization, that will be extremely important. You have to remember that a lot of people feel of the LGBTQ people, they live in isolation, and really what they need is referral and provision of a friendly environment. And this needs to be done first and foremost through training of your own staff about diversity, about inclusion. And this is from the gatekeepers to the frontline service providers, because at the end of the day, LGBTQ people, these are the people they encounter in their first meetings, and if they feel unwelcome already at the gate, they will not pursue any other services or report their situation. And in general, in terms of services, I think there's a need for support groups, there's need for language classes to provide better inclusion. There needs to be community spaces where people can actually meet. And we also need to understand that in the long term, there will be quite a lot of refugees and migrants who discover their sexuality while in Romania, especially if they come from a different culture and suddenly they're exposed to it, or they suddenly realize that what they're actually feeling or discovering is a non-conforming sexual orientation, you know, they would need assistance and referral. And the last thing I wanted to add is also amongst us service providers. I mean, it happened to me not once and not twice, being a gay man, also receiving very hostile reactions from refugees themselves because of differences in culture, values, etc. And this is also a point to to think about how you protect your own staff, how do you work also with refugees on inclusion and diversity. And I do encourage organization to also employ LGBTQ people as employees or volunteers, so you have quite a diverse team that will be able to respond to their needs, which also include being very sensitive if they, you know, to listen to them of how they want to be referred, if it's by name, the name that they want to be used, the gender that they want to be used, and also the service provider and the gender of the service provider they would like to receive services from. Yeah, I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Iftak. I think just to add here, last thing that Iftak said about safeguarding inclusivity at the workplace, this is something that we are going to approach in our very last session. Okay.
Yes. Thank you so much. So while taking in good note of the experience of LGBTI individuals who faced inappropriate reception conditions by members of the mainstream response, I have to take note also of the continued effort that UNHCR has made to train all our staff. This is the standard UNHCR policy, to train everyone who is working with refugees, or even the staff who are in the workplace behind the scene, to train everyone on gender-based violence, and our partners as well. And we have included in Romania, at least from the quite early on, a gender component in all trainings. We adapted the materials, and I think this is a good practice, to explain gender. This is precisely because we noticed that there is, you know, some lack of awareness in the Romanian society about diverse sexual orientation and gender identity. So we did make a consistent effort in that. We made sure even more that everyone who has direct interaction with refugees is even more trained and receives a whole day training on both gender-based violence, but also the gender component that is included in that, and the additional vulnerabilities for LGBTI plus refugees. We made a consistent effort to have provisions on gender-based violence referral pathways for LGBTI plus organizations. It's not something that was without challenges. We had the chance to have a queer sisterhood in Cluj, but we noticed also that even in big cities such as Bucharest itself, we had difficulty maintaining the resources dedicated to refugees with diverse SOGI. We do make sure that we always examine whether our feedback and complaint mechanisms are accessible, and we try to have continued discussions with members of the communities. Again, having worked in 6 UNHCR operations, I must admit that Romania was the most challenging one to reach out to people. And it's not because it's not the most conservative environment where we've worked. UNHCR operates in most countries, and we're still keeping up the efforts. We're still keeping up trying to reach out. We want to do more. And that was a commitment that was reiterated by our country representative today. So everything that we try to do is both mitigate the risks that are specific to the LGBTI community, but also increase the resilience. Through connecting with services, through connecting with specialized services, through making sure, through the efforts, the continued efforts to make sure that we can connect refugees to specialized services, including GBV services for survivors. There was a lot of advocacy efforts from the beginning. I remember like an early on discussion with the authorities where we they were like even hesitant to have on a poster that LGBTI people can be survivors of violence. But we do also notice that this advocacy, because it's so persistent, but because the Ukrainian response is also, fortunately, and of course mostly unfortunately, it is an opportunity for working within the services, for broadening the services for both nationals and refugees. And this is how we try to see this response, including refugees, but also widening the services for everyone. So we have seen that through the consistent advocacy of both UNHCR and all the response family, UN and NGOs, that the protection environment and the flexibility of the authorities to include LGBTI people in the public discourse is somehow ameliorated during these past months. Thank you.
I think it was so well covered. Something else that I can add that we're doing, or I've seen and heard other organizations do in Romania, is for their staff and volunteers, there's specific police checks that you can do for working with vulnerable populations. That's one of the basic steps that we take. And the other one is the specific staff policies in terms of what are the steps when someone brings a concern of any kind of incidents, whether it's sexual or physical violence. What are the steps that they need to take? Who is the delegated member, the safeguarding person in our organization? What if the concern is against the safeguarding person? Do people have access to the board? For example, I'm the safeguarding person in our organization. All the concerns come to me. If there's ever any concern about me, that goes directly to our board. So we have these policies in writing, but whenever we have events, we go over them with our not just our service providers, which are our staff and our volunteers, but the service users, the people that come to our community events. So I would say those would be the only two things that I could add on the topic.
Okay, thank you. We have one last question, but let me ask you, do you have any immediate question that you would like to address already? Yes. Okay.
Not necessarily a question, but something to add on related to background checks and what we can do to strengthen our recruitment processes in terms of safer recruitment. I would add as well asking reference checks from previous employers, or if not possible on previous employers, if the person is too young, maybe we can ask character reference checks that are not part of the family, for example, neighbors, or characteristics from previous professors. That would be a practice that we implemented as well. And another thing would be to have targeted safeguarding questions based on the role that the person is applying, and as well, if the organization, and hopefully all of us have, a safeguarding policy to be made aware to the candidate before joining the organization. This for us proved to be somewhat efficient, so I think it's a good practice. Sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. So my name is Roxana Andrei, and I'm the safeguarding manager for Save the Children Romania since the Ukraine response started. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is Benetta from UNFPA. So I have a comment from for our colleagues and related to HR policies. I'm a bit skeptical regarding reference check, honestly, because they don't tackle the issue of personal biases. I can say that I'm a good person and very inclusive, but in the end, there is no question that can tackle the issue of personal biases. Everyone has biases. This is not a negative issue. But how we improve our system so our staff and ourselves, work on these biases. Not to say I'm perfect, but I have biases, I want to work, and the organization has to support me. So what I see lacking in the workplace is this kind of support to say it's not a negative thing, okay, let's work together. So my question is, have you experienced some of these practices, good practices in the organization that can become a model and that we can adapt? Apart from, I see reference check and having focal point, which is good. But it can be, of course, part of the training, having 30 minutes every month discussion on what is inclusion. Maybe people sharing their own experience, challenging. I'm thinking more on the practical level. We know HR, it's a checklist, but we are people, not checklists. So that's my comment.
I am Loredana Ciofu from Parentis. We run a mental health psychosocial support program for Ukrainian refugees. And for your comment, I would say in practice, beyond the paperwork and the policies, how we integrate this is through staff self-care. So I also saw this in the report as good practices from one of the organizations focusing a lot on their own staff's well-being. And we do that as well. We work with a lot of psychologists and social workers, and the mental load is huge. And speaking of mental load, I will have another note, just a quick one on what Ruth said initially. So yes, doing debriefings, asking people what was the hardest in any of the intervention without breaking confidentiality, of course, but being mindful of their triggers and how the rest of us can help out in the team, because one person's trigger may be another's strong point, and we can find support and help with each other and within the team. So the lack of judgment on this and not seeing biases and personal histories as lacking or as negative traits, I think for us that has been a solution that has worked. We've seen a lot of growth within our staff and a lot of improvement and people being more open. And the feedback we have as program manager is that the work environment is a good one. So I'd say to some amount, it is something each and everyone can do within our organization. It doesn't have to be necessarily included in policies and very stuffy paperwork. It's just being there for each other in this way as well. And just a quick reference, because I'm mental health oriented, and I think what Ruth touched upon, that one of the added vulnerability is the mental health of people, even if they manage to be integrated. I think this also goes back to what Pablo said initially. If we were to look at the picture how we want it to look years from now, how people should be integrated, I think the mental support that they need and mental health awareness for the local community and fighting the stigma that in Romania we have, in Ukraine the same, it's a very high stigma, and they all overlap. The added vulnerabilities, they all overlap in this sector, and the mental health shouldn't be overlooked in this. And it's the last layer that needs to be withdrew from the support, I'd say. Thank you.
Iftak, yes.
Yes, I just want to say that we at HIAS, within the recruitment assessment, there is a question regarding LGBTQ, sort of attitudes towards LGBTQ, just because this is an issue that HIAS has been taking very seriously, so it's one of the criteria for employment. However, we do have sort of a curriculum around diversity that we do and with our staff on issues of diversity, where the issues of LGBTQ is also an issue we work with, usually involving LGBTQ, either member of staff or others or from other organizations. And the idea is, it's first a leadership idea. It's really an issue of a leadership of each organization, because it means a lot of support, because you need to create a safe space where a lot of, discrimination, like racism and other sort of elements can actually rise. Because in order to tackle these issues, you need to face also the realities of prejudice. So this is a commitment. This is something that the leadership of each organization needs to sort of adopt and support, because it will have ups and downs, and it's not an easy process. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Konstantina, please.
Just a very quick note to second what Roxana said, that as a hiring manager, the experience of like having an inclusivity question in the interview has been priceless. And you might expect that, oh, it's a job interview and people will be on their best behavior. It's true, but nevertheless, it's been priceless, and I highly recommend it to any hiring manager to have an inclusivity question, whether it is based on discrimination for LGBTI people or racism and so on. General question about principles and would be really, really recommended. Thank you.
Francesca.
Thank you. Can you hear me? I'm Francesca from Terdezom. I wanted to just point one thing, because I think questions are very important during the recruiting part, but I think what helps a lot is case scenarios, because I used to do recruiting for my previous startup, and it was more for education. And when I was asking them, like, what would you do in certain situations, that's what was like the best moment to understand, like, whether the people had previous experiences or a general understanding. So I think including case scenarios is the best thing. Like, I don't know. I cannot think about the case scenario, but like, what would you do if this refugee from the community would ask you for help, and it has this particular problem, and then, then the person puts themselves into the context, and I think it's easier then to spot a bit what are the lack of, general knowledge. You can also fill the gap with during trainings, of course. So this is my personal view.
Thank you, Francesca. I think just one thing perhaps to add from my side is, because I've noticed in the trainings that I've been doing through the hub, that there is this thinking according to which, briefings, trainings, everybody does this. It's insufficient. It's just insufficient to do one training or one induction and to believe that people are going to be taking safeguarding seriously. But I think that, once you do them more regularly, it becomes part of the organizational culture. And this is what, in the end, matters the most, to have a culture, an inclusivity culture on safeguarding that, you manage to build, but on time. And this is another, aspect that I would like to highlight, that this whole safeguarding journey, that's how we call it, takes time. It's a process, like with anything else that happens in our life. It doesn't even have to be related to the organization, but in general, right? So, I think this is another takeaway from my side. I would like to move to the last question, although I think some aspects have been touched upon. But it says like this: the LGBTQI+ organizations are used to navigating risks and putting the safety of the communities they serve first. In your view, what can the humanitarian sector and broader civil society learn from LGBTQI plus organization when it comes to safeguarding LGBTQI plus people? Ruth, would you like to?
I'm just going to start with some very practical things. I really appreciated your feedback from earlier with your questions and reflections that you had. So I made some notes right away when you were talking. But the most important one, obviously, to me is connect with the LGBT voices right on the ground. So it's great to hear, policy work on LGBT, but most important, get the information from the source. So, do you know any local organizations, LGBT organizations, or that you can follow online? Now you do, Queer Sisterhood, but there's others. Accept, Mosaic, Identity Education, so Rise Out, Iași, H. Brașov, Arc Oradea. Follow them individually. Each has a mission and they're fighting for something, all with the same overall goal of supporting, helping, protecting, and establishing, defending the community. So I would say follow the LGBT organizations and then physically being present at Pride protests. So if you can, there's several in the country, not just Bucharest. And Bucharest is a big one, so if you're here, attend those. If you can afford it, participate in other smaller ones just to join your voice with the local community. Sign petitions, talk to politicians, challenge any kind of attempts to pass laws or to bring laws into the parliament or the Senate that would in any way limit the rights of people based on their sexual orientation or gender identity. We know right now that sexual orientation is protected by law in Romania, but there's no mention of gender identity. This needs to change. This is part of the fight that we do. We work for marriage equality, one thing, but it doesn't stop there. Like the fight continues. Also, finance, donate, support. If you can, as an individual, but also as an organization, all the activists that are doing the work. Go grassroots, but also, think big, anyone who does the work with local governments, national governments. We sometimes go to the European Parliament to speak about the need of put pressure on what's happening in Romania. We need your help. So any kind of, wherever you're present, be an ally. I think that's be a visible ally, not just a quiet ally. Yeah.
Thank you, Ruth. Iftak, would you like to add anything to this question?
Yeah, I just would like, I think we need to be proactive. I mean, we're talking about inclusivity, and sometimes you think that, you can sit in your office and feel that you're all inclusive because the door is open and we have all the signs and everybody's coming, but they're not coming. We have to be proactive, create the links, create the trust and build the trust. What I wanted to add is just that I think that there's a population that we really need to be attentive to, and this is the migrants, especially from South Asia. There's a lot of stories there. There's a lot of people who might identify or are starting to identify, and some of them have stories of persecution back home, but they never were exposed to these issues of actually rights to asylum, rights to international protection. They might need support, and I think we should think about these populations, not just the refugees from Ukraine or refugees from other countries, but also the migrant population that is growing in Romania that might also encompass stories of persecution, and we need to reach out for them and really provide information that there's assistance and there's NGOs that are open to receive them, and also deal with some of the legal implications that they might be experiencing. Thank you.
Thank you, Iftak. Konstantina, UNHCR, it's okay. Yeah.
on this one, we are here to listen.
You are here to listen, yeah. You're not a LGBTQI plus organization. That's true. What?
We're doing our best to be
You are
alive.
doing your best to, yeah. Okay, are there any other questions? To our panelists? No? If not, I'll just invite you to a 5 minutes break only, please, because we are already very late and we have another session, okay? Yes, thank you very much. 5 minutes.